All right, so I apologize for that little bit of a delay, but I had to get things set and my computer didn't want to cooperate with me this morning. So I think we're set now, so that's good. Today, we're going to talk about color theory, colors, and how to incorporate colors into your design. You've seen that I've broken a lot of these graphic design pieces down into their individual components. And the caveat to today is that while I'm talking about color theory, I'm going to make it sound like color theory is the absolute most important thing on the face of the earth when it comes to graphic design. The truth is that it's not necessarily. We'll talk about reasons and meanings behind color and why you might use one color over another, but there is also the simple, you like the color. And so while I'll emphasize all the meanings and whatever today, it's important to give you the caveat up front that color theory sometimes seems like it's more important than it really is. And so I just want to throw that out there. The other thing that we'll talk about today is the Charley Harper assignment, which is your next big assignment. That'll be due, I have to double check on the exact date, but I'm pretty sure it's after spring break, or I'll set it to be after spring break so that you guys, and of course I wouldn't have it due on Monday after spring break because that's just cruel and unusual punishment for you. So I'll have to look at exactly when the date would be, but we'll look at some examples today and you'll kind of get the ball rolling and get started on that. So let's talk about color theory. Color theory is fundamentally about colors. And when we talk about colors, it's pretty hard not to talk about the color wheel. And it's kind of interesting because these are the things that go back to very early elementary education. You know, you're in kindergarten and you work with finger paints and you learn how mixing colors result in new colors. And so we're revisiting that today, but in a digital sense. So first off, we have the color wheel and we have our primary colors, and our primary colors are, there we go. Our primary colors are right here, red, blue, and yellow in the RGB system, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then we have our secondary colors. So those are primary. Our secondary colors are the colors that are in between. So colors like orange, right? Violet or purple, and green. Oops, that should be a 2. Right? And then we have our tertiary colors. These are the ones that are in between. There, and there. And of course, we could have even more colors as this starts to break down into further and further shades. Complementary colors are fundamentally colors that are opposite each other on the color wheel. So if we looked at yellow, for example, the complement to yellow would be directly opposite it on the color wheel, and it would be purple. Likewise, the complementary color for blue, right here, would be directly opposite, and it would be orange. So the complementary colors are always directly opposite on the color wheel. And that's a good thing to be aware of when you're doing graphic design, because you can use a color for a particular accent. Analogous colors, these are colors that are similar, and they appear next to each other on the color wheel. And we can look at this pie-shaped piece that's enlarged here. Those are a grouping of analogous colors. They're all similar colors. And if we look at each level, they're just varying shades from darkest to lightest, but they're still 3 similar colors each time. So those are those analogous colors. They usually match really well. They go together well, but they don't really pop against one another. They all kind of flow together. And so depending on your desire, that could be a good thing. So let's talk about color systems. And there's 2 primary color systems. And most of the time we talk about this RGB system, but there is also CMYK. And we'll talk about each of them, and we'll do that in kind of an explanatory way. And you'll start to see how they work together. So in an RGB system, essentially it is produced with light. So we're using colored lights to create color. And to do that, we're going to use 3 primary colors of light: a red light, a blue light, and a green light. When we have those 3 lights together, when they overlap, we'll get other colors of light. So when all 3, red, blue, and green, overlap, we get white light. If just red and blue overlap, we get magenta light. If just red and green light overlap, we get yellow light. So you can see how that works, but it's very much additive. It has to do with light. And this is how all digital items work. So things like our computer screens, for example, our phone screens, they are in this system because it's about light producing. So the device is shining light, and that's what's causing the colors to be rendered. The opposite of this is where you think of it as like a piece of paper. And the difference here is that rather than producing light, the piece of paper is actually reflecting or not reflecting light. So when we put cyan ink down on the page, for example, all other light spectrums except for the color cyan are reflected back to, or are not reflected back to us. They're absorbed. So cyan is the only color that's reflected back to it. Likewise, if we put magenta ink on a page, the only color that's reflected back to us is magenta. So it's absorbing all the other colors. If we put cyan and magenta together overlapping, the resulting color that is reflected back to us is blue. If we put cyan, magenta, and yellow, all three together, the resulting color that is reflected back to us is theoretically black. That black is kind of a really dark gray. And so when we work in the world of toner, for example, you can think of a color laser printer is probably the best example here, is that they also include black toner. So we have cyan, magenta, and yellow, CMY, and then we have K, which is key or black as that last one. And that gives us a nice sharp black as well. So this is fundamentally different than the RGB system. And so why does this matter? Why do I even introduce this as a concept? Well, depending on what your output is going to be, you may be designing in a particular color space on, say, Illustrator or on Adobe InDesign. So if we knew that the graphics we were creating were going to be projected on a screen, we should be working in RGB mode. If we knew that the graphics we were producing were going to end up being printed on a page, like InDesign, for example, making a booklet, then we'd want to be working in CMYK mode. Now, it doesn't mean that you have to work only, like if I'm doing a print document, it can only be in CMYK. No, of course, we can design it in RGB, but it has to be converted over into CMYK when it goes to be printed. And that can sometimes result in not the best results in printing. You probably had this happen before where you have something that looks one way on your computer screen and you go to print it and it comes out and it looks totally different. Well, a lot of times that problem happens in this translation. And there are ways around it. There are printer profiles and monitor calibrations, and that's all above and beyond the scope of this class to try to get the most accurate color representation. But if you at least understand the concepts down the road, when you come across these, you'll know what they mean and how they apply. Color theory is the idea that there is some kind of a meaning behind the colors that you use, and that meaning brings about some kind of a sensory experience for the viewer. And that if you're being deliberate when you're choosing your colors, you can start to evoke a particular emotion in the viewer. And it's something that's very subconscious, but it's at the same time, it's kind of a cool thing. So if we think carefully about color, we can make good color choices. Color theory is at its core about developing aesthetically pleasing color relationships. Well, that's obviously important. How do these colors work together? So we can think about broad color systems in terms of emotion. There are specific color groups that are associated with emotions. We can have warm colors, we can have cool colors, and we can have neutral colors. So what are these warm colors? Well, the warmer colors tend to be, if you think about like fire, for example, red, yellows, and oranges. Those tend to be the warm colors. They're often affiliated with feelings of happiness or joy, right? Interestingly, in 2009, during the last big crash, we might be headed for another one soon, but in the last big crash, a lot of websites started using more yellow to make people feel a little bit better, feel a little bit more warmth. So these are things that do happen. The cool colors, the blues, the greens, and the purples. You can think about cold water, winter, cold morning, those kinds of things. It's just the blues, the greens, the purples. They're often used for professional, clean designs, maybe emphasizing authority or establishment. stability, trust. Those are the cool colors. And the neutral colors are the grays, the browns, the blacks, and the whites. And they tend not to evoke a feeling in one way or the other. Now, of course, there are neutral colors that lean one direction. We could have warm grays that have a little bit of brown in them. We could have cool grays that have a little bit of blue in them. Right? So there's fine tuning this, certainly. But we're talking about major color groups here. So let's talk about some of the specific colors. First up is red. Red is generally symbolic of fire or of power. It's associated with passion or importance. Stimulates energy, excitement, right? But all of these colors have a little bit of a negative side. There's always a negative associated with a color. The negative connotations of red would be anger, maybe emergency, maybe rage. So that's the negative side. Now, as we flip through, you'll start to see some similarities in the warm colors. Orange, generally associated with happiness, joy, sunshine. Negative connotations, maybe it's still somewhat aggressive. It's kind of similar to red. It can be symbolic of ignorance or deceit. We move to our third warm color of yellow. Yellow tends to be the happy color. It's the color that the kids draw the sun with. In the upper corner of the page, they draw that little sun, and it's always in yellow. Brightness, energy, optimism, joy, happiness. The negative would be that maybe it's caution. We see caution tape. That's yellow. It certainly draws attention to itself. Could be also jealousy or laziness. Green. Green is generally symbolic of nature, healing quality, associated with growth or harmony. It's also very much symbolic of money. And that symbolism stems from the fact that the US dollar is printed in green. If you go around the world, nobody else has consistent colored money. It's always fluctuating colors. But for whatever reason, they chose to make the US dollar green. And so by its end result, it's no surprise that green becomes associated, at least in the United States, with money. It could also be in the negative, showing greed or jealousy. It could also be used as a term for a beginner or a lack of experience. Blue. Blue is the peaceful and calming color. It exudes stability or expertise, symbolic of trust, dependability. It also is rather cold, so it could be passive or symbolic of depression. So here's a fun example. Okay, this is an old page. A while back, I looked up the White House. Obviously, stability is important, and this is what the website looked like. You see the blue, very stable, feels like a White House page. Now, what happens if we take this same page and we just change the blue to red? Feels really different. And it may not be something that you can just come out and say, it's red, so that's a problem. No, it's just something that's small that makes a change. So it's something to think about in graphic design. So I'll flip back between those two. So again, the same page, but it feels distinctly different when it's red. And so sometimes when you're doing these designs, you want to play through what are the various options and what happens when color changes. So here's another example, right, with blue. What happens when that turns red? It feels different. And that's something for you as the designer to be distinctly aware of. It's your job to be aware of that. Purple. Purple is actually considered to be the color of royalty. And that was because way back when, purple dye was the most expensive dye that you could buy. And so if you were able to have purple clothes, for example, you had to be able to afford the most expensive dye. And as a result, it became the color of royalty. So it's symbolic of wealth or luxury. It also gives a sense of spirituality, maybe, encourages creativity. Negative, it could be a little bit gloomy or sad. Black. Black is interesting. Black and white. Obviously, the next slide will be white. But black is interesting because it's generally correlated with power or elegance, sophistication, depth. I always think this is really interesting because architects are known for wearing black. For some reason, we find that appealing. And I think it has to do with the sophistication, the depth, the trust that's in wearing black. It's kind of like Steve Jobs always wore black. It became a signature for him. It can also be associated with death, the mystery, or unknown. It's the color of grief or mourning as well. So it definitely has its negative connotations. White is kind of the opposite, symbolic of purity or innocence, cleanliness, maybe safety. White can also be very cold or distant, like snow, for example. So this is an interesting quote. This is from the Institute of Color Research. Research reveals that all human beings take an unconscious judgment about a person, an environment, or an item within 90 seconds of initial viewing, and that between 62% and 90% of that assessment is based on color alone. So take a second and think about that, okay? So we make a judgment about something within 90 seconds. That's really quick. Within a minute and a half, we're judging something. And that more than half, between 62 to 90, 90 is a huge number, 90% of that is based on color alone. So we're making judgments just based on color about whether we like something or not. So when we think about that, we just did a whole lecture on logos. We can categorize logos into a bunch of different broad stroke categories based on their colors. Now we have the all colored stuff up here that contains everything. But then the rest of these are kind of interesting when you start to look at it, right? What falls under different categories? And it's worth looking at. I think looking at the dependable, the trust is always kind of interesting. Things like AT&T show up there. You know, the big computer companies show up there. HP, right? Facebook, for example, IBM, American Express. Just kind of interesting. You know, likewise, the red colors, things like Netflix are distinctly red. So it's just interesting to look at. And then, of course, you've got down here, you've got Apple showing up in the gray, the distinct lack of color. I also think it's really interesting that Apple's here and Windows is here. They couldn't be further apart in terms of color theory. No surprise that things like John Deere are green, related to agriculture and growing. But it's still interesting. So let's look at some case studies. And these are designed to be kind of fun. I'm going to take you back in time as we go through this. So here we go. Yahoo. Enter 1996. Some of you might not have even been born yet. That's crazy. I remember Yahoo in this era, right? It was a big deal. They hadn't thought too much about color theory yet. However, right up here, their logo is red. Well, remember we talked about red being exciting, excitement. So making their logo choice being red, yeah, it was kind of new and innovative. How about this? You could win $10,000. That's in red too. Kind of interesting. So let's jump forward. Here we are, 2000. We jump forward by 10 years. Notice the Yahoo logo is still red. It's still exciting, but there's an awful lot of green showing up on the page. And you can see right here that they're emphasizing shopping. So the interest of green kind of slipping in there has more to do with, hey, guess what? You can actually buy things online. We can go shopping. Interesting concept. How that subliminally sneaks in. Jump forward 3 more years, 2003. Again, this is like ancient history. The Yahoo logo is still red, but notice we're starting to get just a little bit of purple on the page. That's important for later. A lot of the page is blue. Of course, a lot of it's links, so no surprise, but they're trying to add some stability in here. We've been around for a while now. We jump forward to 2005. We're still seeing the purple. We're still seeing a little bit of blue up here in the search bar. Trust us, right? We're a stable, good search. We'll see, Google hadn't come around really yet. Notice also that we've got a little bit of pink showing up in here. And I think that's time of year specific because obviously it had to do with Valentine's Day. So the shopping is kind of drawing your attention there, but it's pink probably because of the tie-in to Valentine's Day. 2007, Yahoo decided to strip way down. They got rid of a bunch of stuff. This was kind of a move to be more like Google. The background up here is just a faint blue. Logo stays red. So that's almost, that's 11 years from where we started. 2009, you know what? We didn't like that. We want to go back to what we were doing before, where we're showing a lot more. But notice, this is the first time that our Yahoo logo has changed to purple. So they're trying to rebrand themselves into being more of a luxury thing. Not so exciting anymore. We're switching to purple. And you'll see as we go forward that more and more purple starts to show up on the page. So now we've got a lot more purple showing up on the page. And I just love this one. This is from 2013. Look at the rare sea creature found off the California coast. You've got to love it. And then we jump forward a little bit further, 2016. Right, we're seeing the design change a little bit. The Yahoo's getting a little bit thinner, still an emphasis on purple, and most of the rest of the colors are starting to strip their way out. Right, 2017, again, that purple is sticking with it. 2018, again, purple sticking. 2019, they decided to get creative with the logo there, but still in purple. 2019, logo comes back as purple, again, changing just a little bit. And here it is as of yesterday. I do want to point out the use of the red banner here, dealing with the Russia-Ukraine conflict. Again, drawing your attention. War being red, that seems appropriate. It would seem really weird if it was green, for example. So color choice, again, matters. So let's look at another one. How about this for our first page? Apple.com, 1997. So the use of red, certainly, we're a tech company. We're new, exciting. Let's put some red on the page. I love some of the products that show up here. But it's certainly interesting. Pre-order Mac OS 8. Gotta love it. So that's 1997. 1998, Steve Jobs takes over. Now, I should mention, this was about when Apple was going to die. Steve Jobs comes back in, reinvents Apple. The whole website changes. And it changes rather dramatically. Right? Notice the use of black with a little bit of color. Hey, we're back. We're developing. We're stable. We switch over into more of a black color scheme. Now we move over into 2000. How about that for a computer? The iMac. That was the early iMac. But notice that we've got a lot of stability. We do have the red trickling in, a little bit of excitement on the Apple logo. But this is important. They made this computer in a variety of colors. They made it in orange and in like kind of a greenish color and whatever. But the one they chose to put on the homepage was purple. Well, purple is the color of sophistication, royalty, wealth, etc. So this became a luxury item. So it was all carefully controlled so that when you saw it, you started to say, wait a minute. This is a high-end product. And that was part of this whole rebranding. 2001, Star Wars Episode 2 was there, kind of enjoyable. Adobe Illustrator 10, that's the other one that I love, right? How about that? But we've gotten some stability added. Hey, we're back. We're starting to work things out. We've got Mac OS 10. It's stable. The blue logo appears here. The blue logo appears here. all little subliminal choices. 2002, Apple logo turns gray, and this is very much stability. We've got one little pop of green here. That's because it has to do with holiday spending money. But for the most part, we're very stable. We've got a little bit of blue. Everything seems okay. Then, I don't know if you guys remember these iPod commercials. These iPod commercials, they were branded as a very much a luxury item. So seeing this purple background, again, is about that luxury item. And I think it was brilliant marketing. The fact that they made their headphones white was so brilliant at the time because nobody else had white headphones. And it let everybody know when you were listening to your music or your iPod that you had an iPod. Really, really smart marketing. Then we move forward to 2006, introducing the Mac Pro, Quad, whatever. Okay, so in this context, it's the whole page is black and white. Stability, sophistication. Move forward 2007, we get a little bit of shine up on the Apple logo, right up here. But for the most part, we're looking at the new iMacs. There's a little bit of color splashed in on every screen, but it's kind of a whole bunch of different colors. But the website is primarily just black and white. 2010, how about the old iPhone? Gotta love it. But again, Apple itself is being very stable. Still have that shine on the upper, the little bit of a 3D effect. That's 2011. 2013. And then iOS 7 came out, and this was in 2013. And this is actually a really big deal. And it seems like, oh, that was 10 years ago. But this was when Johnny Ives redid the UI. He was the chief designer at Apple. When he redid the UI from iOS 6 to iOS 7, he stripped out all of the three-dimensionality, all of the shine, all of the shadows. And when he did that, it was the first major company to go to a flat UI, a non-3D looking UI. And it really changed the trend of all UI design going forward. And you could see that happen as of this date going forward. Everything really, really changed for a lot of companies. So 2014, we still, which I find really interesting, we still have a little bit of shine up here. They hadn't updated that yet. You would have thought that would have gone away, and it's coming shortly. And this is kind of the full color website. So we're still getting splashes of color. There we are in 2015 with the completely flat UI up at the top, no shine. And they've been fairly consistent ever since. It just got darker. Now it's more black here in 2016, right? 2017, it becomes basically black. 2018, the whole page is black. 2019, there it is. And there we are as of yesterday. So it's just kind of fun to see this stuff. So all of that was done through the Wayback Machine, the Internet Time Machine. It's archive.org/web. If you want to go back and look at any particular website over time, it's actually pretty fun to dive deep on that and look at how these companies have changed. Color information. Palatine is a great website for color information. Colored is also one that we'll work on today, and Color Lovers. So you can play around with that. You can also do Google searches for all of these to get more information. So let's talk a little bit more about Charley Harper and assignment 104. So in assignment 104, you're going to be drawing something in Illustrator in the style of Charley Harper. And Charley Harper was an illustrator in the 1950s, and he's known for creating all kinds of basically animal compositions. So he'd pick an animal and he would draw this or paint this. He didn't get to use Illustrator, obviously, using very graphic shapes. So it was always about a graphic shape and how those graphic shapes repeat in a pattern or get transformed. So there's never any three-dimensionality to any of these images. They're always very much, circle followed by a square or with a rectangle. And that's part of how all of these drawings are created, which lean themselves really well to drawing in Illustrator. So these are all examples that Charley Harper did. These are all paintings that he's done. I'm going to ask you today, as part of your exercise, to find a Charley Harper that you like and then start to think about how you might adapt it into your own. I used to give this assignment where I would have students completely, just, hey, create a drawing in the style of Charley Harper without any backbone. You just had to come up with it yourself. And far too frequently, students ended up with three-dimensional parts to their image. They didn't abstract it into shapes enough. So this time I'm asking you to start with a Charley Harper, an existing drawing, and then adapt it to be yours. So maybe evolve the type of bug that he's showing. Or maybe if we were looking at this one with the ladybugs, maybe instead of a heart, it would be a different shape behind it. Maybe the colors change. So you're adapting it to become something that's more yours, but we're starting from a Charley Harper, an existing Charley Harper. So these are all bird examples. I really like this one from a composition standpoint because there are so many layers to this drawing. So the topmost layer is probably the bug right here. So that's level 1. Then we have the leaf, which is level 2, which is laying on the surface of the water and casting ripples, which would be level 3 for the ripples, right? Then we have level 4, which would be the lily pads. Well, actually, I missed one. This the dragonfly here is level 0. That's the highest one. So we have level 4, which would be the lily pads. Level 5 is probably the snake. Level 6 is the fish. Level 7 would be the lobster. So we're getting all of those layers. It's all flattened out, but we're getting those layers one on top of each other. And that adds an incredible amount of depth to this image. So it's a lot about patterns, but again, all very graphic shapes. So let's look at some student work that's been done in the past. So these are Illustrator drawings. To me, this one has a little bit too much 3D to it. I think it's just in the face. I think it would have been better. See right there, that should be more of a circle and flattened out rather than the 3D part. I thought this one was particularly well done with the knife added. And this could have very much been a Charley Harper right out of one of his compositions. This was a good adaptation of the raccoons, the flamingo. And I had to include this one. It's not really a great example of Charley Harper, but at the same time, compositionally, it's just so well done, I had to include it. This was actually one of the very early ones that I did back when I first started teaching 14 years ago. And so I think the student's name was Rosemary McGowan. I pulled that name out of somewhere. Anyway, I just thought pattern-wise and repetition-wise, it's just really, really nicely done. But it's a little bit outside of the realm of Charley Harper. So we're going to jump over, and I will pull up let's see if I have it here. Okay, let's look. In our assignment, oops, wrong class, sorry. All right, let's look right here at our work for today. So that's 115, and also at our assignment 104 here. All right, so 115, we're going to work with colors today and color theory. So we haven't forgotten about that. We're going to work on creating swatches. And so I'll walk you through that part of it. We'll come back to this. But first off, under part 1, I want you to select a sample Charley Harper image. So I want you to do a Google search, look for Charley Harper, find an image that you want to base your work on. So you're not going to copy it exactly, but you're going to start with that as a base. And you'll save the image, and you're going to post that to Canvas. Okay, so that's part of turning this in, as I want to see that. Then we'll work on some swatches. I'm not going to require you to actually turn any part of the swatches in. I just want the Charley Harper as reference for you. At the end here, if you have extra time today in your 2 hours or whenever you decide to do it this week, I want you to start working on that Charley Harper composition. Okay, it's due on the 6th. So the 6th is the Wednesday after spring break. So it's not due on Monday, it's due on Wednesday. So getting started now is a good thing, so you don't have to worry about it over spring break. So I always try to set those up so that you don't have something to do right away. So here's assignment 104. We're going to work on Charley Harper work. You're going to choose a source image, and then you're going to draw probably on top of that image to start to create it. I invite you to work with a color palette here, and then you'll ultimately be submitting that work to Canvas. Okay, so let's start looking at our color palettes here. So we had a variety of websites. I think one of the great ones is Peloton, and actually I should probably do this on the remote desktop. So let me flip over here into the remote desktop. All right, so you guys can look up the Charley Harper. I'm very confident in that. But let's start looking at the color theory. So Peloton right here. We'll go ahead and accept those cookies. This is a website that can help you determine color relationships. Okay, so right now we're set in a monochromatic mode. And in monochromatic mode, it's giving you analogous colors based on a primary color. So we can spin this primary color wheel around. And so let's say we were in purple here. Then it's going to give us 3 analogous colors to that primary color. So our primary color here, and then we've got the dark, medium, lighter, and lightest of the same color. This here would be what they call adjacent colors. So those adjacent colors, again, it's kind of like nearby colors that are analogous to each other, but more than just the single one. So if I pick this would be my primary, it's giving me the same dark and light range, but then it's picking analogous colors that are related to it. It's actually only those 2. This is a repeat of that one. If I go to this one, they call it a triad. I think it's more of a split complementary. So remember, complementary colors are directly across the color wheel. So our complementary color to this red would be, for example, a green. But instead of giving us the green that's directly across, it's giving us one to either side. So our primary is red, it's giving us kind of a teal, and it's giving us kind of a lighter green. So if we came around here to blue, for example, right, we might end up with a greenish yellow, maybe like that. We've got our blue, we've got a greenish yellow, and we've got kind of a gold color. If we came over here into purple, we'd end up with kind of a green and a gold. That split complementary, I think, can work really well as a color scheme. This one here, the tetrad, is basically 2 analogous colors directly. It's got, 2 analogous colors and 2 complements of those analogous colors. So as you spin this around, right, let's say it's orange, the complement to orange here would be directly across here. The complement to the blue would be directly across there. So it's a way of helping kind of sort out colors that you like. So I'm going to go back to this split complementary. I'm going to pick the purple, which gives me kind of the gold and the green. And if I like these colors, I can actually download them. So if we come down here to tables and export, it will give us the colors. So here's our primary color in purple, here's our secondary color, and here's our secondary color 2. And I can download those swatches. Now, of course, I could write down either the hex value, which is up here, or I could write down the RGB value, 160, 113, and 168 to create that color. So let's look at it in Photoshop for a second. So I'm going to open Photoshop. Today we're working with Photoshop and Illustrator. So let me open Photoshop to start. All right, let me just create a new document here. Let's create new. Oh, that's fine. I thought I created it. Okay, so if I wanted to get that color, I could double click on my foreground color here, and under RGB, I could type in that value. So I could come over here, I could say, this is the color I want. It's 101, 39, and 112. So I could come in here and type in 101, 39, and 112, and it's going to give me that purple, which is right here. Alternatively, I can also type in the hex value of that. So I could come down here and I could look at the hex value. So let's say I wanted this green. It's 6B9A33. So right here, I could do 6B9A33, and there's that green. So it's another way of getting that same color. So certainly, I could write all this information down and use it that way. But sometimes it's more beneficial to keep these as swatches that you could load. If you know you have a certain group of colors that you want to reuse, you can download them and save that color swatch. So right here under color swatches, right, it's going to let me save them as a PNG image or as a Photoshop file. So if I click on that ACO Photoshop, it'll actually download a color palette right there. It's called mypalette.aco. And I can load that by opening up the swatches here. So these are pre-existing swatches. That if I click this little 3 lines, I can actually import swatches. And then I can go to my downloads, and there's the mypalette.aco, and I can load it. And it will then show up down here at the bottom. There's my palette. And there are all of those swatches. Now, the problem here is that that file that we just downloaded here, that ACO Photoshop file, is not compatible with Adobe Illustrator. And we'd prefer for it to be compatible. So if I were to open up Adobe Illustrator, there we go. Right, and I open up the swatches window here. So if I go to window and then swatches, there's my swatches window. If I went to try to open it, so I could say open swatch library, other library, and I went into my downloads. Well, I could be wrong. Maybe they've updated it. Nope, it won't let you import it, which is so annoying. What we need to do is we need to take the Photoshop swatch file and convert it into a universal Adobe format. So if I were to take this first color swatch, hold down Shift, and select the last one, see how they're all highlighted in blue like that? Once they're all highlighted in blue, I can actually export those. So I can come down here to Export Swatches for Exchange. This file, instead of a .aco, is going to be .ase. And this is a file that's universal to Photoshop, it's universal to Illustrator, and it's universal to InDesign. So this is really the ideal file to have. So let's put it in my flash drive here. And we can call this swatches, for lack of a better term. Okay, so now that is a file that I can load here. So I can come over to my 3 lines, open swatch library, other library, and go to my flash drive. And there it is. And when I open it, it'll load them right like that. And I have all of those colors. So on any fill, right, I can choose, oh, I want it to be that color, or I want it to be that color. So that's the advantage. I don't have to know what the hex value is to be able to type in that color. I can just click on it, and it's then going to be that color. I can make it have no stroke, and then any one of those colors can be applied, oops, sorry, to the fill color, like that. Okay, so let's explore some of the other websites. I said Palatine was one. Colored, C-O-L-O-R-D, I think. Yeah, C-O-L-R-D. It's one of those websites where they removed vowels. So in this website, it's actually kind of interesting because you can get colors out of an image. They have this, of course, we could create a palette, right? These are all palettes that people have created. You could download those palettes, but you could pick an image and then get the DNA from an image. So these are all colors from these images. So if you had a screenshot or you had an image, it can help you identify what the colors are. Let's see if we can do it. Create right here, image DNA. And then we can, I believe, open a photo. So let's go to upload. And I should have downloaded something. Let's all right, let's say that I like this one. Right. Let me just save the image as, and we can put it in our downloads for right now. And then I can come back to this image DNA. I can choose the image. This is assuming the website doesn't crash on me here. Let's go to downloads. Open it. There it is. And it's going to identify the primary colors that are in that image, which is kind of a neat concept. So from there, let's go ahead and click on Save. And see here, it's listed as download Illustrator, Photoshop, or GIMP. So let's look at each of these file types. If I click on the Illustrator file, it's going to be a .ai. So that's only going to open in Illustrator. And lo and behold, the Photoshop one is only going to open in Photoshop because it's .aco. So in either case, I'm stuck with just one program. So to make it universal, I'd have to go into Photoshop. Over here in my swatches, we're going to load that swatch. So we'll come down here. We're going to import swatches. It was this my color. I can click on load. And there it is. I can select the first one, hold down Shift, and select the last one. I can go to that little flyout menu and choose to, why won't it let me export for them for exchange? That's annoying. I don't know why it won't let me export them for exchange. I'm going to have to look into that. I'm not sure. There we go. Export selected swatches. Try selecting one more time. Yeah, now it will. I'm not sure why it wouldn't. So export selected swatches, and we can call my color Oh, sorry, it was supposed to be export for exchange. Export swatches for exchange, sorry. ASE, and then we could call this my colors. And there it is. That would then be loadable in Adobe Illustrator. So in the swatches right here, I could go into my open swatch library, other library. And it was the my colors, Adobe Swatch Exchange. And there's those colors there as well. So today's functional practice is really about understanding these swatches and creating these swatches such that you could save them and reuse them. That being said, there are some other swatches out there that are specific to Illustrator that can be very beneficial. So on the Digital Tools site, of course, I'm not logged in. Maybe I'll post them on Canvas as well. Under resource, oh, I have to log in. Hold on. And now I need my password. Hold on. I try to have this stuff logged in ahead of time, but sometimes I make mistakes. Okay, so let's look at this here. Under resources, under swatches, I've created a bunch of swatches that are based on Prismacolor markers. And so you're more than welcome to have and to use any of these. You can download the zip files for any one of these. If I were to download this one, for example. Oh, that's nice. Save link as. Okay. We'll just put it in downloads for right now. Now, these ones are a little bit different because they're specific to Illustrator. And they're specific because they have a texture to them. So let's go here. It's still downloading. So I have to choose to keep it. There we go. Let me extract it. So I'll right click and say extract all. And there they are. So if I go into my swatches and I go to open swatch library, other library, I can go into those architectural swatches and I can load. It's going to be this one. Right there. And the advantage here is that if I were to, say, draw a large rectangle and pick one of these, you can see that it has some streaking that's built into it. Like that. And so when you're actually filling in or using these to color an object, they have just a little bit of a pattern behind it, which can be, it's meant to look like you colored it with markers. So that may be something that's beneficial for you. This is not usable with the streaks in it in any of the other Adobe applications. It's specific to Illustrator. However, in the same file, you may have noticed that I do have a swatch exchange. Right, there's the ASE, and this gives you at least the colors that are used. And these correspond to the actual marker colors that are in the sets. Okay, so they're there for your use should you want them. I just throw them out there as kind of a fun side note. I'd like you to explore these swatches, make sure that you're comfortable creating them. But like I said, you don't actually have to post anything as part of your lab exercise today. I just want you to feel comfortable with swatches and being able to load them and convert them between Photoshop and InDesign. It's, again, always done in the swatch window in any one of the Adobe programs. It used to be under a preset and a preset manager in Photoshop. So if you see something that's a holdover from a previous class where I talk about a preset manager, that's antiquated. It doesn't happen anymore. They've moved things around. Okay, so I know I'm out of time. I talked a little bit long today. I appreciate all of you guys sticking with it. Thanks. If you let me know if you have any questions, and if not, you're free to go. And I'll have my first check-in group stick around, and we'll talk.